The banner of God's help is always in my hand, and perhaps this is the umpteenth time I'm repeating that we must open the space for His help to reach us. With these verses we've read, you will understand that life or God is always trying to help us, not punish us. We experience punishment due to our own wrong choices because we've made our mind our center, and we see through identifications. However, pay attention to these verses that correspond to the first quarter of the first verse. Indeed, we have granted you a clear victory. Quran, Surah Al-Fath, 48:1. This clear victory is not a victory over others, nor a geographical victory where we conquer a land. The clear victory is the victory of a person over their mind, individually and collectively. Life wants us to be victorious, and the second verse says, that Allah may forgive for you what has preceded and what will follow, and complete His favor upon you and guide you to a straight path. Quran, Surah Al-Fath, 48:2. You see, this sin refers to identification. Sin means seeing through identifications. Life forgives these sins if we have seen and acted through identifications, creating problems for ourselves and others. It is us who do not forgive. Life holds no grudges, but we do in the mind. Then the verse continues, and that Allah may support you with a mighty support. Quran, Surah Al-Fath, 48:3. This is also clear. If you open the space, He will support you with support in which victory exists. For the mind, victory and success are unimaginable. It constantly asks, how can one become God? You leave that to Him, do not speculate, and open the space instead of resisting and judging. Let's move on to the second quarter of the first verse, where it says, O standard-bearer of God's help, O torch-bearer of Yasin. Opening the inner space is the essence of Yasin's torch, but Rumi invites us to pay attention to the key points in Surah Yasin, which he focuses on. These useful points about the Quran that we learn from Rumi are places where we might slip. If we understand them, we will not slip. Let's review a few of these points, starting with Kaza and Kun Faya Kun. These concepts are mentioned in Surah Yasin, which says that when God wills, He says be, and it becomes. This is crucial. We must free ourselves from the causal mind that says, to change I must do this, and this will happen. Instead of acting out of causality, we must surrender and wait for God's command. Kun Faya Kun. Rumi explains, a moment I am slow, a black moment, what else is there but this divine act? Rumi Masnavi, Book 1, verse 2465. He says that when God commands, He guides us like a chess piece, like a striker, and we are the pawns. If we resist, the strike happens one way. If we do not resist and open the space, the strike happens another way. But we know that the inner and outer worlds are in His command. He says, this is your physical body, this is your mind. Like a chessboard, our world is governed by His will, and we must surrender to it. Are we surrendering? Observe your behavior. Are you truly surrendering? When we encounter others, do we open the space or react? When we respond, we contract, we become dark. This contraction shows us that we are seeing through the mind. When we open the space, we see that life helps us, and the outer world becomes more aligned with the inner space. The concept of Kun Faya Kun is explained in Surah Yasin, verse 82. Indeed, His command when He intends a thing is only that He says to it, be, and it is. Quran, Surah Yasin, 36:82. This is a powerful verse. When God wills, it is. There is no delay. Things happen as He intends. This verse reflects Rumi's teachings about surrendering and allowing God's command to work through us. Rumi continues. The divine command of Kun Faya Kun strikes like a chess piece. We run in both the physical and the non-physical realms. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 1, verse 2466. This is the same Kun Faya Kun concept, and we must learn to stay in surrender. Let's look at another verse from Surah Yasin verse 32, and indeed we will bring all of them before us together. Quran Surah Yasin 36:32. This means that everything is present before God in this moment. He is aware of everything and no one is absent from his presence. Rumi explains that humanity is in his presence, even if unaware. He is waiting for us to stop seeing through objects and start seeing through the open space within us. Rumi continues, "And I will send mercy upon them now, and all will be present before us." Rumi Masnavi, Book 3, verse 33-94. In this verse, mercy is sent upon those in God's presence, and Rumi points out that no one is absent from God's sight. We must realize that life is always present and that Kun Faya Kun is a fundamental aspect of creation. We must open the space, surrender, and allow God to work within us. Self-discipline, or riyadat, involves disciplining oneself through conscious effort and mindfulness. It's about resisting the pull of worldly desires and attachments, learning to let go of ego-driven cravings, and trusting in spiritual transformation. Understanding patience and gradual change is crucial. Rumi uses the metaphor of creation taking place over 6 periods or days to show that change is great. He warns against rushing spiritual progress, as true transformation takes time and patience. The comparison to a flower blooming slowly from a bud reminds us that we shouldn't expect sudden breakthroughs or rush the process. The role of divine command, or kun fayakun, highlights that life unfolds according to God's will, and we do not control the timing or process. There is a reminder to accept this divine unfolding, even if it feels difficult, and to trust in the larger picture we can't always see. Rumi cautions against comparing one's spiritual progress to others. Everyone's journey is unique, and such comparisons come from the ego and only create frustration. Patience and trust in the divine timing of your life are key. Surrendering to the present moment is essential. Rumi's teaching stresses surrendering to the present and staying centered now. This requires releasing everyone from external circumstances and relying on divine wisdom to guide one's path. The passage warns against the deception of ego-driven desires, symbolized as Satan's trickery. When we hurry and compare, we are caught in the ego snare, which prevents us from experiencing true peace and transformation. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 3, verse 33-96. Riyadat means that we have learned consciously to recognize and let go of these attachments and identifications. Our minds have become accustomed to them, love them, and think they are dying. But with these points we understand that we are not dying, we are becoming alive. In consciousness, let your heart embrace your soul. And when something is taken from you, don't get upset. When you submit to service, you open space and wait. In this way you will take your soul, meaning you will be victorious and extract your soul from the ego. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 3, verse 33-97. He says that if this consciousness or self-awareness has been taken from you without your choice, meaning you didn't choose it, instead of shouting, crying, and complaining, open space and be thankful. Instead of giving thanks, we complain and become angry, and you, the successful one, will reach this victory. The only victory that has value for a person is victory over their ego, which is the only freedom. We define freedom in many ways in the ego. The person must get rid of it to attain liberation, and as long as we are identified with it, we are not free or successful. When space is opened and the identifications are gone, that is when we are successful. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 3, verse 33-98. See, in these few verses, 2 verses of the Quran were very clarifying. When he says that God gave you consciousness, be thankful. You did not choose it. He did it with his decree, Kaza and Kun Faya Kun. So it becomes clear that God's decree governs our life. Previously it was said that God makes our hearts black, lights them up, attaches us to something, and then takes it away. We endure, and it becomes clear to us that we should not let things be at the center of our lives. We should not allow something or someone to consume all our attention to the point where we lose ourselves in it, follow it, and let our minds be consumed by it. Rumi refers to this when he says, "We should not be foolish, we should not let our desires dominate our intellect." Surah Yasin, verse 36-32. "And there is none of them, except that they will come to us in the end. We are always in his presence, and Kun Faya Kun works in life." One of the points that Rumi explains about this verse is that when God wills, decides, and decrees, he says, "Be, and it is." This is not about haste or speed, and this is the essence of our impatience. When we hurry, thinking we want to reach the present moment faster, we imprison ourselves in the mind. And this is what Rumi says. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 3, verse 3500. "With patience everything is created by God. It took 6 days for the earth and heavens to be made." Patience means calmness, not suddenness. Our transition from ego to presence is not sudden, it takes time, and we should not lose hope or become discouraged. The divine unfolds gradually, and we should not compare ourselves with others, as the ego makes us think we can rush things. For instance, if someone makes more money than you in a shorter time, it doesn't mean you should measure your success the same way. Similarly, spiritual progress can't be measured by the ego. Rumi teaches us to be patient and trust in the divine timing, which is always perfect. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 3, verse 3501. He says that God could have said "be" and created 100 worlds instantly, but he has chosen to make everything gradually. Everything develops in its own time like a flower that doesn't bloom all at once, it opens gradually bit by bit. He could have created 100 earths and skies, but he chooses to unfold them in time. Rumi says it takes time for a person to fully become their true self, like a man who grows over 40 years. Is it possible to start when you are 10 years old? Yes, it is. However, waiting until 40 is unnecessary. We should start early and not rush the process. Rumi says patience is key, and we must not impose our ego-based timelines on the divine process. Using a measuring stick of the mind will only make us frustrated and impatient. Patience, on the other hand, will keep us calm and composed, allowing us to fully embrace the divine process. Rumi Masnavi, Book 3, verse 3503. God can create 50 people instantly, but he chooses to gradually lead us away from identification and make us conscious of our ego over time. If we begin the work gradually, we will awaken. These are the subtle points Rumi shares. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 5, verse 2570. Hastiness is a trick of the ego, and patience is the mercy of God. Rumi says that rushing comes from the ego, and those who hurry remain in the ego. Those who don't hurry have open spaces in their hearts, don't judge, and do not compare themselves will experience divine mercy. Rumi Masnavi, Book 3, verse 611. He continues, "I strive but not with my mind, I don't hurry and I don't complain or compare." Patience and contemplation without measuring with the mind are the keys to receiving divine mercy. We fall into the ego's trap each time we rush or compare. Finally, Rumi shares a story about a scribe who wrote the revelations of the Prophet Muhammad. The scribe thought he was receiving revelation as well and became prideful, but his ego deceived him. He lost his position as the scribe and turned away from the faith because he couldn't recognize that only God could give revelation. When people believe their ego is at the center, they lose their connection to divine wisdom. Rumi Masnavi, Book 5, verse 550. Let's discuss an important point again, this time from Surah Yasin. Rumi today said that you should read these verses and see how you can light the flame of humanity within you, using these insights. And if you pay close attention, he said you can. Rumi's teachings remind us that life is a journey of constant self-reflection. He guides us to hold the torch of his assistance, the banner of his help, and light the torch of Yasin. In this process we must be conscious not to harm ourselves. This call to self-reflection invites us to delve deep within, to understand our actions and their consequences. Rumi's wisdom echoes that life is a constant process of shedding the dead weight of the ego. As long as we cling to it, every action we take is self-harm. Rumi Masnavi, Book 2, verse 1400. The people who lost their way, those with the ego, said to the prophets, "We consider you an omen of misfortune." They told this from foolishness and ignorance because they had become accustomed to seeing through their identifications and were always collecting more of them. If someone comes and tells us that gathering all of these won't give you life, that seeing through them keeps you stuck, and that your doors are closed because of it, we get upset. We see that in every direction we want to give the least and get the most. We've been taught in the ego that the more we have, the better our life is. We compare ourselves to those who live more, have bigger houses, more money, more successful children, or better social statuses. But then someone comes, whether a prophet or someone like Rumi, and says, all of this thinking and behavior is wrong. Do we like that? No, we don't. Program number 855, page 45. That's why this program, which has gained so much support, is very good. The first encounter with the words of Rumi, the great ones, and the prophets is that they don't align with our ego and way of life. They said, "We take you as an omen of misfortune." This verse from Surah Yasin, verse 18 says, they said, "Indeed we consider you an omen of misfortune. If you do not desist, we will surely stone you, and a painful punishment will touch you from us." Now the question is this how you feel about Rumi? Because the things he tells us at first we don't like. Then we start criticizing. We might think, I don't think Rumi said this verse. It doesn't align with my ego, so I think it was taken out of context. But these words are meant to make us change. We've lived for a lifetime, thinking we need to show ourselves, compare ourselves, gather more, criticize others, and show ourselves as better in comparison. Would we like it if someone told us all our efforts are futile? No, we wouldn't. We can't accept that we may have spent 60 years living wrongly. Program number 855, page 46. Now ask yourself, are you willing to listen to Rumi and change your lifestyle? At first it's hard. We constantly hit dead ends thinking, if I change this, then I'll have to change that too. We want to avoid it, thinking it's someone else's fault. But Rumi says, you've created all your problems yourself. The person who has spent their whole life blaming others for their problems is suddenly told, it's all your fault, you created it. Will they accept that? No, they'll struggle. That's why Rumi says, pull the conscious door yourself. Program number 855, page 47. Rumi's words mean that those with an ego who see through identifications cannot create purity. Pure things can only be made by those who open the space, who have emptied their center of the ego. People who hold on to their ego, who see only through identifications, cannot create anything pure. If you tell someone to stop seeking external validation, to stop gathering artificial blessings from the world, it's like telling them to stop drinking poison. They'll resist. They won't like it if you ask them to surrender, open space, and take in the light from the other side. They must undergo a process of discipline and hardship. Rumi says that people who haven't emptied themselves of the ego cannot receive these teachings. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 4, verse 283. He says that they started complaining when they could no longer sense the fragrance of divine revelation. The fragrance of divine revelation is missed by those who don't accept it because it's not in their favor. These people begin to say, we consider you an omen of misfortune. They argue that listening to such teachings will bring them hardship. Rumi, Masnavi, Book 4, verse 284. So if someone openly advises others to change their way of life, they might be stoned. People resist when they hear advice that contradicts their ego-based desires. Rumi challenges us to reconsider. When you think someone is wrong and you're right, it's a moment to reflect and change. If you feel resistance to his teachings, that's where you need to reconsider. Program number 855, page 49. Rumi also teaches us that those with the ego have grown strong from engaging in useless activities. They are stubborn in holding on to their ego, and they feel alive only through such activities. But this is an illusion. If we keep blaming others for our issues and avoid changing ourselves, we remain trapped in the ego. We must take responsibility and stop blaming others. This text reflects the human tendency to engage in repetitive, unproductive, and often painful cycles due to the mind-made self, referred to as mansani, the mental self. It emphasizes how people usually labor without meaningful rewards, and their relationships become strained because they fail to transcend the ego's grip, seeing themselves and others through limited, judgmental lenses. It critiques the tendency to view life through a distorted, ego-driven perspective, preventing true connection and self-awareness. Using poetry and wisdom from figures like Rumi, the author invites the reader to recognize that these issues stem from internal mental patterns of attachment and identification. By breaking free from these mental patterns and embracing mindfulness and openness to the present moment, one can experience life with clarity and presence. The core message is to shift from a state dominated by the ego and its judgments to one of awareness and openness, where the mind's false identifications are released. This transformation leads to greater peace, understanding, and meaningful relationships. Human blindness to truth. The passage laments humanity's tragic oversight of the wisdom and guidance offered by enlightened figures. Despite the ripe fruits of wisdom falling from the trees, people remain oblivious, continuing to consume the rotten apples of superficial attachments, judgments, and mental identifications. Self-identity and illusion. The idea of the mental ego, shaped by self-identity and judgments, is central. This false self, a master of illusion, blinds individuals to deeper spiritual truths and the real present moment. The egoic mind, which sees things through filters of attachment and resistance, is the chief architect of a distorted view of reality. The role of surrender. The text also stresses the importance of opening up one's inner space to God, acknowledging that only through surrender and shedding the ego can true understanding and peace be attained. The ego, with its illusions and attachments, keeps individuals from seeing the deeper truths of existence. Spiritual guidance and the path to enlightenment. Drawing upon Rumi's metaphor of trees bearing fruit, the passage suggests that spiritual guides, like Rumi himself, offer wisdom to help people achieve enlightenment. However, many reject or overlook this wisdom due to their egoic attachments and resistance. Desire for collective awakening. The text passionately expresses a yearning for others to awaken, referencing the Quranic verse, Ya Lait Qawmi Ya'lamun, which means, would that my people knew. Various prophets, including Jesus and Muhammad, used this phrase to express their sorrow over people's ignorance of spiritual truths. It's a fervent plea for a collective awakening, a societal shift towards spiritual awareness, overcoming mental conditioning. Finally, it reflects on the idea that true liberation requires individuals to transcend their conditioned mental patterns and open their inner space. Breaking free from the ego. The text vividly portrays the mindset of individuals in their egoic forms, shackled by attachments, identifications, and the mind's illusions. The shape number 9 symbolizes the mind's ego, a constricting form, while shape number 10 represents the true, open, and missive state of being, a liberating and inspiring sight, divine assistance and transformation. The passage also stresses the transformative power of divine grace. By opening oneself to this grace, individuals can transcend their ego and begin experiencing a deeper connection to life. This leads to joy, peace, and spiritual clarity, often described as freedom or true existence. The role of self-reflection. The text suggests that humans must look inward, question their beliefs and mind attachments, and recognize the limitations of the mind. Only by doing so can they open the door to a more profound, authentic experience of life and spiritual awakening. The poet's perspective. The passage often uses Rumi's Masnavi to illustrate these teachings. For example, the metaphors of the dead candle and the lost wine symbolize the dormant or disconnected state of the soul, which, when awakened, can lead to the flourishing of true human potential. reflection on human struggles and mistakes. The text also discusses how people often remain trapped in their mental constructs and fail to see the truth. It suggests that spiritual transformation begins when one stops blaming others and instead takes responsibility for one's path. So he says that the person who has struck presence will be astonished. You will be astonished too. If you have opened up the space and this space is opened and you feel good, joy without reason comes, and you have grasped the wisdom of life, found true security, the power of God is behind you, and a force within you is guiding you. You might wonder how this is happening. What is going on? Why is this veil of identification and delusion still before the eyes of people? Why don't they come to work? They might not come, perhaps they will never come. That's why we repeatedly say don't insist, don't recommend anyone to listen. People may need to knock on the door until they are ready, and one day ask, we tried so much with our ego, why haven't we changed? At that point, perhaps they will find the way on their own. Therefore, we do not impose or recommend anything to anyone who does not want it. Yes. When we see these, the shape number 9 of the mythical ego which perceives through identifications, today says, what is this magic that they do not eat ripe fruits but eat rotten apples? What is this magic that someone is busy collecting something false and expecting life from it? Why doesn't he look at the life of the ancients? Why doesn't he listen to the words of the wise? Why is the approval and attention of people considered life? Why doesn't he ask, what is this veil of misguidance? This is the veil that truly God removes. People are varied with 100 opinions and intellects, but they do not take even a step toward it. We see that the day of our return has come. Repentance from the ego has become our livelihood. It says that divine mercy covered my faults twice and forgave me. Life truly saves us in many places by giving us the opportunity to return, open the space and center ourselves in nothingness. The sweet repentance has made me like the life of the day. Shape number 9, the mythical ego. Again, divine mercy covered me, and the sweet repentance became like the life of the day. It means I realized that these actions of my ego are wrong, and I have often come and opened my center. I have worked on myself with shape number 10, which represents the true human existence. This is the state where one is free from the ego's influence and lives in alignment with their true nature. Yes, now let me read. Whatever I did, it took what I hadn't done. It took the worship I hadn't performed. Therefore, life is about support, kindness, love, and help. We read these teachings so the first verse becomes meaningful. It says, whatever sin I committed, do not bring it to the surface, and whatever worship I had not performed, it took that. This means that life is forgiving and supportive, always giving us opportunities to correct our mistakes and improve ourselves. It freed me like a cypress and a lily, and it made my fortune and prosperity joyous. Thus, it freed me like a cypress and a lily. When I opened the space with shape number 10, the true human existence, I suddenly saw that I was becoming free. My speech was activated and I became like a cypress. I saw that I was gaining depth, and fortune and blessing came to my life. So, whenever you start seriously and commit to this nothingness, which refers to the state of being free from the ego's influence and living in alignment with your true nature, life also begins to help. In each person's ego, a direction is taken, and gradually life enters these directions. People see through different lenses, each taking a path in a specific direction. However, those who have awakened to presence have not allowed themselves to be consumed by anything or reclaimed their identity. Instead, they have turned toward the unknown. Yes, this is the case. Wherever you turn, there is the face of God. Every pigeon flies in its religious direction, but this pigeon flies towards the direction of non-being, a path that invites us to ponder and question. Therefore, each egoic pigeon flies in a religion or path and takes on a certain color. But there is one pigeon we are after, and we want to be like it. It flies toward non-being. This means it makes the center null and flies toward the unknown. We are neither birds of the air nor household birds. Our seed is the seed of non-being, a concept that sparks curiosity and invites further exploration. So, we are neither birds of the air nor household birds. Our seed is the seed of non-being, which means the center is null. We don't imagine ourselves as air birds or household birds that lay eggs. We are following the seed of non-being. From this, the day became abundant for us because the shedding of identity began for us. This line is important because the day has become abundant for us, for we receive from beyond. This moment, with anything we identify with, we shed identities. The shedding of identities is from the moment we detach from identification. Therefore, such a person's sustenance is abundant. Yes, I have chosen a short ghazal to share with you in this section. Let me quickly read it to you. It is very interesting, for after all this talk, Rumi addresses us and shows how the ego and the self act like a dog. It is truly beneficial for us to understand the ego. O ego, how long will you gnash your teeth like a dog? You suffer from the pride of others, but in you is 200 times worse. He says, O ego, like a dog. Of course, this is not an insult to dogs today. As you know, dogs used to be wild and would attack. Nowadays, dogs are very kind, and we shouldn't look at them and judge them according to Rumi's analogy. The ego behaves like an animal that constantly bites us and others. You must be cautious of this egoic behavior. He says, how long will you bite both yourself and others? You suffer from the pride of others, and what you suffer from is 200 times worse in you. That's to say, we suffer from things in others that are in us, and more so. This is very enlightening because whatever you are upset about in others is actually in you, and even more. If it were not within you, you wouldn't even understand that it exists. Strangely, when we fall into the mythical ego of shape number 9 in the morning, along with judgment and resistance, we see our own faults in others and suffer. When we open the space and make the center null, we begin to see shape number 10, the truth of human existence in the form of the witnessing presence, realizing that these struggles truly lie within us, and we begin to remove them. Therefore, the advice is to constantly create space around the faults of others, so we can see that these faults are in us as identifications, and we begin to resolve them. Crying and poison with the people, what with anger, like the roasted head of a lamb, which I am laughing. You constantly complain and look at your ego, always spreading pain. You both wail and spread suffering. When anyone looks at themselves and behaves angrily with others, it's as if they are acting entitled, with violence. That's why you are never truly happy. And your laughter is like the laughter of roasted lamb heads that the cooks put on display. It looks like laughter, but in fact, it is expressing anger. The laughter of the ego is from anger, not genuine joy. I am a Sufi in my Sufism. I am a commandment of goodness. For whom is the jailer? He who is in prison. Here the jailer in the second sense is also a prisoner. He says, you say I am truly a Sufi, one who has reached Sufism. I am the supreme Sufi. I am the one who commands goodness, inviting others to righteousness. But you, who focus on inviting others to goodness, still have the ego. You are like the jailer who controls the prisoners but is also imprisoned. The jailer is a type of prisoner, or if you ask, you mean that the imprisoned one is no longer the jailer, the free one is the one who goes around. This shows that if we are focused on controlling the behavior of others, we are like the jailer who is imprisoning others but is himself trapped in the same prison. Excuse me, I do not apologize, but I am excused. Others should ask for forgiveness from me, for I am an artist. He says this person doesn't apologize but believes himself to be excused. The ego has this trait. It says I haven't done anything wrong, everyone else should apologize to me. I am excused, I am great, I am without fault, I do not see bad, but everyone else does. This person is wrapped up in himself. This is the condition of the ego which cannot apologize. Apologizing is the first step in returning from the ego to this moment. Shape number 10 represents the true human existence, the one who recognizes his faults and apologizes. according to my wishes, you interpret the Quran, and then you turn it into something that binds the people. He says that sometimes you consult the Quran or other great books to find something that suits your ego's needs. You read a verse and hit people on the head with it. This is how the ego operates. But do we do this too? We should not interpret the teachings of the great ones for the benefit of our ego. If you humble yourself, you who have ego and pride like shape number 9, the ego, if you submit, the true human existence of shape number 10 will emerge. He says that if you humble yourself and submit, the true human existence will emerge. This is the state of being free from the ego's influence and living in alignment with your true